Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all my creatives. My name is Chris Branham, and welcome to Strategies for Creatives. This podcast is literally going to be talking about two major areas: one, employment, as well as entrepreneurship, and how you find fulfillment in both. How do you find satisfaction in both areas? Let's brainstorm. How do you find satisfaction in any area of employment, meaning your job, your day to day 9 to 5, or even entrepreneurship? Sometimes it can be a little difficult. Some statistics show that there's still over 70% of people that truly dislike their environment, their jobs, their bosses, picking their careers, like they're really unhappy. And one thing that I've noticed is this mentality starts from a younger level. And the level I'm talking about is where, for me, I'm 38, they started trying to tell us you need to pick a career. This usually happened sometimes in middle school, sometimes as early as elementary school, and they start asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, one of the problems with saying that and asking somebody that is, do you have enough time to discover what is important about each area? Do you have enough time to understand what's important about each area? Because you might pick those things, one, because you see your parents doing them, or you see something that you really like about them when you were younger, or it's just, a gravitational to, just something that you saw about it and not so much the totality of it. I want to be a fireman. I want to be a police officer. I want to be the president of the United States. But until you have a really good understanding of all of those areas and what it really takes to become those things, you might not know enough. You might not have done enough research and discovery. So when you're asking a child, what do they want to be when they grow up? It's a very blanketed statement that will get a very premature and very muddy response because they don't know enough to know anything. So when people don't like their jobs and they're currently in positions now, it stems from that. And the only reason why I say that is I've done enough mentorship from my preteens to teens to my 20s, now my 30s, to realize that everyone is struggling with the same thing. And it starts right before you either go to college or go into the workforce. And your problem is trying to figure out what do you really want to do, and you're forced to pick a position and you're forced to pick a career without any study with understanding. You might get small increments of information, but it's not enough to give you enough information to make a quality decision. And when you don't have a quality decision, you make a lot of very big mistakes. And one of those major mistakes is what you plan on doing for the rest of your life. So how do you fix that mistake? You have to find the why. What is the reason behind you wanting to go in that career? Now, it can start by money, prestige, notoriety, all of those different things. But the real core reason of why has to be deeper than that. When you see a lot of people that become very successful, whether in business, whether in careers, working for somebody, or sports figures, athletes, they all have a deeper why. There's a deeper reason. I want to get my mom out of the hood. I want to make sure my family's good. I want to make sure I pass on something for my next generation. Like there's always a reason why of the hard work that goes behind what's necessary and what's required. Now, if you don't have the deeper why, your momentum will slow down. So I mentioned that before. Your momentum will start becoming very stagnant and mundane, and you'll find it very hard to push forward because you don't have enough information to know why you want to do something. My personal why had to deal not with my family, but it had to deal with something I read in a book. It was the reason of you can't take anything with you after you die. So for me, realizing between my birth and my death, that dash is very critical for me. And I want to make sure when I leave, I don't leave anything on the table. I want to make sure all my creativity has been fulfilled. Everything I desire to say has been said. Everything in my future has either been started and someone else can pick it up, or I can pass something on to the next generation, whether it's my children, whether it's family members, whether it's close friends and associates. It doesn't matter. I want to make sure I leave everything that's left. I don't want to leave this life with nothing still in the tank. So that is my reason why. Figure out what your reason why is. Why do you really want to go in the career you want to go to? Why do you really want to start that position and that job for other people and that entrepreneurial goal? Why do you want to do it? It has to be deeper than frivolous things. It has to be deeper than surface things. Some surface stuff will keep people going, but at a certain point, you will plateau. That's why a lot of people that are very successful, meaning six figures, seven figures, etc., find themselves quitting or transitioning. There's a lot of celebrities that are doing that are in movies and been cast for so many years, and they found unfulfillment. There's several different aspects of that because you're in a lane that has either changed or shifted, or it wasn't what you expected because there wasn't enough information available or something changed and now you've become a new person. So are you willing to figure out your deeper why all over again, or are you going to stay with the same why to try to keep that same momentum? So in the midst of your why, you might be in a current position that you don't like, and that is okay. But you have to understand one thing about that. Have you learned everything necessary in that position? Or are you just flighting through it, going through the motions, and you're just looking for your out? You're looking for the escape route. You're looking for the exit. And that's a constant in your mind. Try to understand if you do desire to go somewhere else and to fulfill your deepest desires and find fulfillment and satisfaction in a career, figure out what you can learn now, either good or bad, because either one of them is going to help you in your next state. So you have to make sure you're maximizing all the things that's in the current environment to understand how you can leverage them moving forward. That's a transitional moment. That's something that you have to figure out because it's not always going to be a clean jump. Sometimes you have to plan and find a process for that jump that makes sense. And that brings me to my second point, obligations. So when you're trying to figure that clean jump and that transitional moment, are you obligated to do anything else? Business and entrepreneurship and employment, they're all in the same lane as being a young man's game. And I say young men, but I'm also looking at young women as well. Anyone young. Why? Because they're looking for the next person that can help sustain the actual business that's been created. Because anybody that starts a business, they don't start it for it to die. They start it for a good reason. And usually it's for momentum, it's to see the peak, it's to see the productivity. And with that, you need young individuals to keep that momentum going. Within that momentum as a young individual, you have more spontaneity, you have more thought, you have new ideas, you actually have youth on your side, so you're more energetic, and you're going to come with all of this to a environment that needs it. So if you're looking for employment, they're looking for you. If you're looking to start an entrepreneurship and you want to start a business off the ground, it's great because there's zero obligations in the beginning that you have to think about when it comes to family dynamics, making sure other people are depending on you. So the younger you are, the better in most of those environments. The younger you are, the more time and effort and energy you can put into something without feeling the pull and the weight of supplying and creating a household and environment for younger individuals, for kids, for even a wife. So the more that you can do while you're single and while you're young, the better. The more information, the more books you can read, the more courses you can attend, the more travel to get more experience. So you now can leverage that experience in the new areas of your career. All of those things are important. So when you look at the second one, the obligations are really key and support so much of young individuals. And it brings me to my third point, have a plan. I can't stress it enough. But having a plan is actually an old man's way of doing things, or an older gentleman, or a seasoned individual to figure things out. Why do I say seasoned individuals? Because they've been at the ground floor. They know what it's like to start, and they realize that at a certain point, you can't just do it winging it. You got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy. You got to understand the processes and the systems that are necessary in order to fulfill what you desire to do. So whether you're going in a career path that desires more of you, how do you do that without getting burnt out? How do you do that staying consistent? How do you become the best version of you and you don't have a plan? You will be winging it all over the place. One thing that I think about when it comes to planning is how an individual might go from, a college student to employment, and what they're going into, there's certain phases, right? Depending on the position, depending on the career path. If you're a doctor, you can't just skip. You can't skip steps, right? In some instances, in some businesses, you might be able to skip steps, or it might be a shorter process or a shorter time frame in order to gain all the information necessary. Electricians, they might have a little bit more time because you're dealing with high level risk. When you deal with somebody that might be, driving trucks, lower risk but high tolerance depending on the type of trucks that you're driving. Are you driving hazardous materials? Are you driving, just frozen products? All of that makes a difference depending on the type of information and what you need to grab and gather before you make that career change and the career positioning, which is, again, it's all of that planning that's required. Are you looking at the phases that's necessary? Are you reading books that are outside of what's being taught just in schools? Because when you're thinking about career, this might be happening at a high school level, junior, senior level, and you're now trying to figure out what's my next step. Are you reading more information? Are you doing more research at that moment? Or are you waiting to graduate to start the process? Here's where momentum helps. The more you plan, the more you have understanding about how much momentum is necessary. Because if you don't leverage that momentum in the beginning, now you're going to try to pick up speed. It's no different from a car, or better yet, a rock rolling down the hill. The bigger the hill, the more momentum. So the bigger the hill means the more information in order for you to propel into where you want to go. And you can hit the ground running, especially if you start early. All right, so it brings me to my third point, and this one I love the most. And the reason why I love it the most, because it's attached to the second point. Plan is great, but you got to have a strategy for the plan. What does strategy mean when it comes to understanding your why, understanding your plan, and understanding the career you want to go in? That means you have to take pivotal steps to understand and where you go and how you maneuver. Because you can have a plan all day, but until you have a strategy for that plan, you can still be flighty. A strategy weeds out all the information that's unnecessary. It puts you on the path that is for you, and it helps you complete the task. It helps you get to the end goal. It helps you make sense of why you're doing everything. Because if you don't have a real strategy backing that thing, you're going to now be swayed anyway. You're going to be looking all over the place. You're going to be distracted. You're going to have distractions anyway. But the more focus you can have is because of that strategy that you're implementing. So with strategy means research. So you got to understand what you're doing. You got to understand what's necessary. You got to understand the processes, the systems in place. Because if you don't get that information, it's going to be very, very hard for you to now figure out how to leverage something else. And then you'll also need mentorship. I love the strategies that come with sports, because sports to me is like playing chess. If you are able to see everything on the board, it makes chess very easy, because now you understand what the players can do, what they can't do, how they can move, how they can't move, and it's a very even playing field. So when you come into strategy for sports, the other team knows what they can and can't do as well as you. Everybody has the rule book. But now it's the strategy to get to the end of the game, the strategy to get to the most points, the strategy to get to the championship. How do you strategically do that? Every strategy is different. Everybody has the same rules, regulations, processes. They have the same amount of team members, etc. But now, what are you doing strategy-wise in your training? What are you doing in your habits, in your eating, in your sleep habits, your behaviors? What type of individuals and coaching is coming onto the team, allowing to add something to the strategy that's being fulfilled and kind of being cultivated for the entire team in its totality? Those are the differentiators. If you don't know the strategy, now you're a part of a team or a part of employment, and you're a little bit hazy on why certain things are moving a certain way. But when you understand the strategy and the reason and the goal of the business, you can now jump in and know your place, know your role, know what questions to ask, how you can now leverage what you have and you can leverage what they have. And it's now a more of a marriage rather than you on the outside looking in. And there's two areas that I like to think of when it thinks of strategy. One, you want to be book smart as much as you can. That means with the research, you want to study, you want to become as much as an expert in that environment. And the second part about that is you want to be able to understand it from a applicable level, meaning you now are putting pen to paper, you are now doing the thing and you understand it, not just from a book level and a mindset, but you also understand what's it like to be doing the actual thing. When you actually start working, what is the difference between what was said in a book versus now what is actually being done on the field? And that is the difference between now applicable information and strategy versus somebody with business book knowledge or career knowledge in a sense, but they never really did it themselves. You might be able to talk a good game, but until you start doing it yourself, you start seeing the gaps. You start seeing where somebody is now giving an assumption or they're giving their idea or their conceptual thought, but they really don't know what they're talking about because they never did the thing. There's a TV show that I love, Undercover Boss. Undercover Boss was really cool because some of them were CEOs, some of them were founders, and they would go undercover in disguise and they would work with the people at the low level. So they might not have never known who they were. They might have only seen them based on like a number or hiring, but they never really knew who they were. So when they got into their position and started doing what the low level person was doing from a CEO perspective, they now realized this job was way harder than what they thought. Or there were problematic areas, or they realized the person was deficient or inefficient, or they were very efficient and brought new things because they were trying to do so much better and so much more, and they loved the job or the position. Or they realized that there were gaps in it. And then now it gave insight to the boss. And this is one of the things that I would recommend for anybody that's either employment or entrepreneurial. You want to have moments where you reflect. And with reflection means surveys, means questionnaires, and means asking someone else how you're doing. You want to be able to leverage what other people are saying in order to be a better person at the position and at a strategy level. Because if you don't know how well you're doing, you could be doing a very good job at being horrible. You could be doing a very good job at putting bad systems in place. You could be doing a very good job at being a bad manager. But until your people tell you that, and you're asking people to be very candid and open about their conversation with you, you'll never really know. You'll only assume that you're doing a good job based on something you either saw or heard. But again, to Undercover Boss, they had to be in the trenches with these individuals. They had to understand how they were operating and maneuvering to understand what was really going on and how they were really being affected. And then now that would help if the CEO put it in position in place to make the business work even better. And now the strategy has changed, not just to focus on one part of the business, but the totality of the whole company and organization. And it brings me to my fourth point. So this is the four core pieces. So far, we talked about the why, we talked about the plan, and we talked about the strategy. Now let's talk about prioritization. How do you prioritize your list, your plan, and your strategy? Because you can have them together, but some are going to come before the others. And the thing that I enjoy about prioritization, it cuts out everything that's unnecessary and it puts a pin on what's considered valuable. If you do not consider it valuable, why is it a part of the plan? Why are you adding it in? Is it something that you just like or enjoy? Is it ambiguous in a sense? But if it has nothing to do with the process and the goal, you might want to remove it because you're going to cause more problems and hinder your momentum if you start adding things that aren't necessary. That's called baggage. That's called dead weight. That's called dragging people along. And now you have to understand, where now do you fit in the process? What things do you need to implement? And when I think about prioritization, it always brings me back to how businesses start. So this is for the entrepreneur right now. If you are setting up a business, who do you need involved? What systems do you need involved? How many people? How often do you need to touch base with your team? What are you going to outsource? What are you going to keep internal? Those are simple things, right? Those are things that's going to definitely show their card really early, really soon when you start doing any type of work or service for anybody. But the key to those things is, how have you put value on them? Have you put value on your individuals? Have you put value on your systems? Have you put value on the team in its totality? Have you put value on the client? because all of those value pieces is going to prioritize what's necessary and what's important to the organization and what's really important to you. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how you want to better yourself and better the organization to bring not just momentum, but longevity. And when you're thinking longevity, that means the right prioritization. That means the right information, the right individuals, and the right processes that's going to help you bring years, decades, if not, bicentennials to a business, because you have the capability to keep going because you're valuing certain pieces in the organization. So now you got to look at your moral compass. Where does that come from? Because you can have great business practices, but you can be a morally horrible person. Those type of things filter over to employees. They filter over to other individuals. They filter over even to clients. And then you start realizing, like, why am I not really building the momentum? I'm staying stagnant. Some things is just an emotional change. Some things it's a mentality change. It can be as simple as that. But it's the reflection that you have and the priorities that you are building that you need to kind of reflect on and pay attention to, because they're going to help you understand the values in those things. How much time are you spending with your family? A lot of people, when they're growing businesses, they might look at, well, I got to focus on the business and, I really got to make this happen because what I desire for my family is X, Y, and Z. Those are great things. Those are great whys. But you also have to understand one of them is going to suffer. Either the business is going to suffer because you spend more time with your family, or the family is going to suffer because you spend more time with the business. Those things right there are where you put your value. How much time are you going to focus on? Are you going to get up earlier? Are you going to sleep better? Are you going to pay attention to your eating habits, what you digest, what your intake is, what you're reading? All of that matters. So when you're thinking entrepreneurship, it's not just one area of business. It's your livelihood. Everything is going to shift. Your family's going to shift. When you go into employment, it may or may not, depending on the strenuousness of the business and what they're asking from you in your role. If you get paid more, obviously you're going to be asked and required for more roles and responsibilities. But as an entrepreneur, when you first do your business, a lot of that sits on you. So now, is your family comfortable with your transition, you doing entrepreneurship? And then you have some of those, which I'm in the same boat, where you're a employee and you also have a business. How do you balance your time then? How much can you take on as an employee and as an entrepreneur? Those things make a big difference because it's really easy to get burned out. And it's also very easy to negate your time with your family. So when you're thinking about how you're maneuvering, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up to win. And how you do that is based on all the priorities that you're putting in place and the systems that are related to the plan, that are related to the process. Because if you don't think about those, you're more than likely going to negate something. Now, granted, you can't think about everything. Not every scenario is going to show up. But there's some that will. There's some that are just necessary. Somebody in your family might need you at a certain point. If you have children, one of them might get sick or one of them might get in trouble and you got to take care of them. Or if you have a family and you're married, you're going to have to spend time with your wife. So that's not a negotiable, depending on how well and how lively and collaborative you want your relationship to be and your marriage to be. So some things are non-negotiable. So now those are buckets in your prioritization list. Those are buckets for how you want to maneuver to make those things make sense. So nothing is necessarily suffering, but some things might just be a hindrance or might be a pause. And that's a big difference from something just completely being neglected. So your family's not being neglected, but they realize you have work time. Right? And your work is not being neglected if you have family time and that time is already set aside. But you want to make sure you're not mixing. So you have to be diligent and focused with what you're doing when you're setting up those priorities and you're making it a plan and a process for you. What can you really do? What is really in your wheelhouse? How much can you take on? Knowing yourself is going to be a big deal when you start going into these processes. And one other area too about prioritization lists, if you're trying to transition, that's another area where now you might have a secondary prioritization list on how you transition. What do you need to take care of in your current employment? What's required, what's necessary, how much money you might need to set aside for the transition so you don't feel the hit when you're transitioning to either another place of employment or going into entrepreneurship? Do you have enough money saved up? Are you counting the cost for the transition? That is a big thing most people do look over. If you look at a lot of businesses that start, they say the first 5 years, really the first year is the toughest part. And then those after that are even more tougher because the counting of the cost is usually overlooked. You might negate very small, minuscule things that add up very quickly, especially if you have systems, you're buying products, if you have a brick and mortar, that's a bigger deal because now the overhead is larger. But you have to make sure you're looking at everything as much as possible and going through it with a fine tooth comb at least monthly. I would recommend weekly as a business is concerned because you want to make sure everything is allocated and you're not missing a beat. So I got a bonus piece for you guys. This is the fifth one. So we covered four real core areas, but the fifth one I want to ask you guys, and I would love to get your comments and see what you guys think about it. How are you leveraging your creativity in your current career and your future career, whether it's another place of employment or entrepreneurship? How do you want to leverage your creativity in that? So when I say creativity, I'm talking about your talents, which is your natural God-given gifts, the things that were given to you without reproach. They're just for you. Your gifts, the things that you learned along the way, you picked up, you developed, you've utilized, and you've matched and formulated with your talents. And then your skill set, the things that are considered wise to you, the information, the knowledge, the processes that you've learned. Those three areas, talents, gifts, and skills, how are you leveraging those in your current position and how do you desire to leverage them in the future? Because when you put all of those together, that is what's really going to bring you fulfillment. When you enjoy what you're doing and you're being creative at your core. Because what's creative at your core is you. That's the real you. That's the real desired you. Because you can do mundane jobs all day. But if you're only doing mundane, you're not tapping into what you really like, what you really enjoy. And the thing that I've noticed about is it's a very critical thing. When I got married, I love my wife. I enjoy time with my wife. But when I like the person that I'm married to, that means I am going to do more things because I enjoy not just the person and what we have together as far as our communion, but I enjoy the fact that I like her. I like the things about her. I like the things that she enjoys. So now it's a dual meaning, and the why is way deeper because it's not just a surface level of love. Love is going to be there. But if I like you, that means I want to be around you. That means I want to be around whatever you're doing. So when you like what you do, when you like your career, that is the satisfaction that you're going to find. And when you like it and you can leverage what's already inside you and the things that you've gained, that's going to propel you way farther than you can imagine or think when you're leveraging your creative skills, abilities, all of that information. It's going to be the best thing you could do. And you will truly find fulfillment. I found fulfillment. I know other people that have found fulfillment. I've helped other individuals find their fulfillment that had great jobs, but they just did not enjoy what they were doing. So the momentum that you'll have will definitely propel you into the environment and the career that you desire to be in, whether it's entrepreneurial or it's employee or even both. So if you desire to enjoy what you're doing, definitely continue on this path, this journey with me with the podcast. If you're interested in more information, join our school community, Strategies for Creatives. There will be a lot of information I'll start sharing with that. There will be different courses that I'll be dropping in there specifically for those that are members. And then also definitely like and subscribe. Jump on the YouTube, jump on the podcast, because I will be dropping a lot of free information. You can consider them gems or what have you, but it's going to be in the same vein. So if you're looking to transition or your career goal and your career path as an employee is fulfilling, continue this journey with me. I want to make sure you are leveraging all of your stuff creatively, skillfully, that'll help you propel where you are, where you want to be, and your future endeavors as a creative individual. Peace.